The views and opinions expressed by the guests of Sasquatch Experience do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the hosts, sponsors, or affiliates of the Sasquatch Experience. As always, listener discretion is advised.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Does a legend walk among us, lurking in the forests of our world?
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
I can't tell. All I know is that my central light came on and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard. A good-sized man or something looks like a man. I don't know what it was.
For over 15 years, we've talked with scientists, researchers, investigators, and witnesses, trying to gain insight and proof around the existence of this mysterious entity.
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Dia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh. Okay, hang on.
He's right...
Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, God, he's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
He's looking at me.
Join us as we continue into the investigation of the Sasquatch Experience. All right, team. The mics are hot, and good evening, folks. Welcome to the Sasquatch Experience. Sean Forker, Henry May, Vance Nesbitt, James Baker here on Monday, November the 1st, 2021, guys. We are past Halloween. Happy belated Halloween to all you creeps out there.
Mm-hmm.
Good to see you're all here, and your candy went without incident. Henry, how much candy did you get last night?
None.
I heard you went trick-or-treating as James Baker.
Wow.
I believe at one point you used the term "give me all your money, bitch," or candy. Give me all your candy, and you got beaten to the sidewalk by.
But he would take the money too.
Yeah, he'd take the money. Hey, the economy's getting
I
tight.
walked around yesterday and got vodka and burgers, but that doesn't really count as trick or treating.
In fact, the economy's getting so tight, folks. You can sponsor us by going to patreon.com/Sasquatch Experience, starting at $2 a month. That you too can be part of the Sasquatch Experience and help produce this great, fine quality program each and every week, as some of our good friends do, that you'll see at the end of the show. But guys,
wait, did you say fine quality?
Fine quality.
I heard produce.
Well, you know,
We're always trying to make that fifth.
Hey, people,
Henry the
guess
Fifth.
what? You know what percentage we're in right now in as far as podcast goes? Sean, please do share.
We're top 20%.
Yes, we
It's a good number to be at.
Yes.
I
Yes,
only
it
know
is.
that from our analytics, and I don't know why, but you folks keep coming back, and you keep coming back in greater numbers. So we really
and we
appreciate
appreciate it.
that. We do. We actually have
They
a lot of
sound
fun
like the
doing this
sand
show.
people.
They come back in greater numbers.
It'll all be fine.
Yes.
This is not the Henry you're looking for. What are we talking about tonight? Oh, Yosemite.
Something with Yosemite. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we called this episode Ahwahnee, which is the Native American term, the Miwoks, I believe, meaning big mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like a lot of people get swallowed up by this big mouth called Yosemite every year. And it's actually quite disturbing. Yosemite is one of the top places in these missing 411 clusters. I guess we'll just dive right in and get past the pleasantries. There's an awful lot to talk about when it comes to Yosemite and the missing 411. So I went through this through a bunch of different angles, guys. I looked at some folklore. Yosemite means killer in the Miwok, to the Miwok people. It was the name of a tribe that was driven out of the area, which and it's also Yosemite, I believe, is another term for grizzly bears, which are pretty frequent to Yosemite. So it's something else to think about. There are natural predators there that can take lives as much as man or any other supposedly mystical beast. I said mythical, not mystical. Hopefully, you got the mythic part in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just disturbing to see, the amount of people that are disappeared. And again, as we played at the beginning, there's no database for how many people have gone missing in national park system, but they do keep a cold case file. And actually, I was looking through that before showtime tonight because, like I said, I was trying to put an angle. Where do we go for each and every show that we do these on? Because I don't want everybody tuning in every week thinking they're listening to a goddamn repeat on we're just flipping locations, right? And what does this have to do with Bigfoot? Are we talking about missing people? Are we talking about Sasquatch? What's the connection? And actually, if I knew there was a freaking connection, I'd be able to write David Polite's next book for him called Missing 411 Salt. Ain't missing no more. And we'd have some answers. But the fact of the matter is it's a very frustrating puzzle, not just for the people researching it, but as those of us that are trying to present this in a way that's impactful and in a way that resonates and stays. So you stay on to this mystery. What the hell is happening in these national parks where these people are disappearing? And then we've talked about different theories where we're at. Do I think Bigfoot's part of it? Not 100%. As we find out, one of the Jane Does that were missing in Yosemite is very likely a victim of Henry Lee Lucas. But what's the problem with Henry Lee Lucas? He's a flippin' liar. He's the only not the only serial killer, but he was one of the few that, greatly inflated his own numbers to make it seem like he killed more people than the actual authorities believe he did.
Right.
And so you have to wonder as we go through these areas, the Rocky Mountains, the Shenandoah, Great Smoky Mountains, like how many of these people perhaps did fall victim to a serial killer? Or is there a serial killer that frequents these national parks? Is the serial killer a big hairy hominid? We don't know because there's so much that we don't understand about why these people disappear. And I wish you could say there was a specific type of person. Now you can narrow it down and say there is kind of a type of person that kind of fits the missing in general, but there's always anomalies that fall outside that.
True.
Right?
It's not just limited to
Yeah.
one type of person, though.
That's the frustrating part.
There's categories of people that seem to go missing more often than other categories of people.
Legal pads.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. But even in that category, the young male, right? Healthy males, even in that category, there's deviations in that.
Right.
It's not one particular, race.
Right.
It's it really stems flows through different levels of education. There's not just one thing you can nail down like you would a serial killer per se and say, well, this is their type. This is what we need to look for. Right. These are the type of people we need to frequently and pay attention to in state parks, to say nothing of the fact it's grossly underfunded. And especially right now in the post-COVID world, state parks aren't the first, actual level of priority in terms of funding, even though we enjoy them and want to go out and be a part of it. Last year when we started doing this show again, we started talking about, the levels of which state parks were being funded. And it was, even talking about how many rangers there are per park is drastically different. And also doing the 4-on-1 study, you're realizing a lot of these rangers rotate between parks. Like they do X amount of years, they follow a discipline, then they move on to another park. So they're never in a position long enough really to build a case study, to really learn the data before they're shuffled off somewhere else. And part of me wonders if that's done on purpose.
Well, it's a good possibility. Yeah, go ahead, James.
It could be the pastor factor. They're moved on because they learn too much, or they start asking the wrong questions, so they move them to somewhere else to, get somebody fresh in, so that then they don't the people around them don't start asking questions too.
Yeah. I just find it. It's just when you look at a place like Yosemite, right? It's almost 760,000 acres. Right, it's almost 1,200 square miles of real estate. That's a lot to take in and search and to be responsible for.
Right.
Takes up 4 counties. It's not a small spot, right?
Mm-mm.
About 45 miles north of the Mammoth Lakes, which is another hot spot for Bigfoot, hot spot for grizzly bears, right? Like you start going to a lot of these areas, guys, especially in this part of California, you have to wonder, what deal of these missing people are really done at the uh, responsibility of a known animal.
Of
The
known
mountain
nature,
lion,
right?
yeah, right.
Mhm.
And that's where it starts to get a little bit more difficult, because even at that point, does the National Park Service want to cover up how many of these people actually get taken down by natural
Mm-hmm.
predators?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's not good for tourism either. Hey,
No.
come to Yosemite, get a T-shirt, and get slaughtered by a grizzly bear, or something along those lines.
Right.
Henry,
I
what's
don't
your
know.
thought?
I don't know if you've had. I'm sorry. I don't know if any of the three of you gentlemen have had an experience to visit Yosemite. I've been there twice. Um, the second time I was there, we were in a motorhome. And again, to be completely honest, it was my father's motorhome. And in the morning, it was a brisk, cold morning. We were in a designated camp area, but this designated camp area was a little bit more sprawl than
Okay.
most camp areas are. And in the morning, we couldn't open up the door of the motorhome to come out, and it was still dark out. My father tried to get the door open because all the elk were leaning up against the motorhome to stay warm, because the
Fascinating.
motorhome was running with the generator. We couldn't, and we didn't know this. My father's trying to budge the door open and he couldn't get it open. And we look out the window because we had the curtains closed for privacy. And here's a whole herd of elk. And, something as trivial as that. And of course, this is all before I was really involved in the whole Bigfoot community to begin with. But just having that experience, that human presence didn't affect them at all. Not at
Yeah.
all. They were right there. And we only assumed that they were keeping warm against the motorhome because the generator was running all night to keep us warm. And when you're at Yosemite, for the 2 times that I have been there, when you see pictures of it, like you present at the beginning of the show, and you see pictures on the internet of Yosemite, yeah, it's beautiful. But when you're there and you have your peripheral vision plus your perspectual vision in front of you to see the entire scope of the immensity of this park and its beauty and how gorgeous and how massive it is, it leaves you immediately, when I got into this community, to go, this is easily a place that anything could exist, including a serial killer, without ever being discovered,
Well,
let alone a
and
bipedal creature.
there's real potential to that. Henry, go ahead. What's your initial thoughts into this episode?
Well, Yosemite, I mean, is a very famous landmark for people to go visit and everything. And you made the point about grizzly bears. How many people go missing because of grizzly bears every year? Does the park keep a tally on that? Is what I'm wondering.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would almost find it hard to believe that they would catalog that, but not catalog missing people. I don't know why. I just think it says 2021's been a brutal year for bear attacks. I just Googled the shit out of that. There have been 8 reported bear attacks in 2021, but 1 in California. So really, it's not been that. Hell, 1 grizzly bear attack. I don't know if that's enough to stop the presses and shut down the parks, but how many people have gone missing in 2021 so far?
Right.
We don't know.
To go back, and I'm not trying to step
why
all
would
over
we
this
count
conversation just because of the fact that I actually visited there. You don't have people around you when you wander into the park and you take certain trails. You don't have certain guides to keep an eye on you
Yeah.
as to activities that you're remote. You're in the middle of nowhere in a national park. You're on your own. You have to have your own responsibility. You have to have your own conscious of what's
Yeah, fair
going
enough.
on around you at all times. And a lot of people visit a park to see the beauty without having the aspect of keeping an eye on what's going on in their surroundings. Yes, there's a lot of brown bears in that area. I don't necessarily refer to them as grizzly, even though a lot of people get into the whole grizzly bear aspect of it. I think that's more of an Alaska thing. And I'm certainly not trying to, denote what biology is as far as what animals live where. But yes, there are a lot of bear in that area: brown bear, black bear, wild cats, mountain lions,
Yeah.
bobcats, etc. But you're not given all this information to be aware of what your surroundings are. Yes, when you go to the visitor station, when you check in at Yosemite, they hand you a pamphlet and move along. Please give us your money and move along. And I think
So
probably as far as the parks go, in taking information from people, yeah, they want the dollar. Move along. If something tragic happens, well, do we really want that negative connotation regarding our park?
but
It
now think
really
about
sounds like the
this.
free clinic.
Think about this. 3.8 million people visit Yellowstone Yellowstone each year. 12.1 visit the Great Smoky Mountains. 12.1 million, about 4.5 million visit Yosemite.
Right.
Those are a lot of people funneling into
Sure
a
it is.
national park. But now think of this: you're saying when you're at Yosemite, it's a little you feel like you're on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Just how immense does that have to be when you're visiting?
That's
Probably
my
with
point.
100,000 people.
Right.
You know, if you're feeling desolate out there, right, by yourself,
No,
kind of off on your own,
I mean,
that's
we
crazy.
went there, like I said, I've been there twice. We went there on season and once off season. On season, you could hit any trail and you wouldn't run into anybody else on that trail.
Come on.
Yet you have that volume of
girl.
people in the area. That's incredible. That is absolutely incredible. And to me, now looking back on it, to go, okay, so let's say that there was 1 million people that had visited over the summer season in the peak visiting season. Yet we'd hit the trail to go on a hike, we wouldn't run into anybody. That's the immensity of what you're looking at in the scope of the acreage or the square mileage of that entire park. It's insanity. And of course, there's a lot of, it's not insanity. That's a wrong term to use. It's what was gifted to us as far as the volume of area and all the trails that you could go on and yet not be influenced by other humans on that trail and
So
get to experience it.
there's about 16 to 17 fatalities a year
Mhm.
at Yosemite, and they conduct about 240 search and rescue missions a year. And there's 1,100 employees.
Right.
1,100 employees that manage
Right.
almost 1,200 acres or 1,200
Right.
square miles, 760,000 acres, and 4 million people.
Right. Now,
Think of that.
let me
Think of the
interject with
ratio
that
now.
real quick. Yeah, but let me interject with that real quick, Sean, because I don't want to get off the whole Sasquatch thing. A lot of those employees are maintenance. They're
Yes, no,
emptying the
that's
trash
true.
cans and so
That's
on. They're
true.
not responsible for the people. The park rangers do more, and there's a much fewer number of those than there are of those that are handling maintenance, car problems, getting a tow vehicle in to get somebody unstuck. Oh, there's a bathroom issue with this outhouse over here. That's where the majority of those employees are focused on.
Well, and that's where we should be spending the majority of our time interviewing people,
Mhm.
not the rangers, the people that actually take care of the park, the park
Right.
stewards.
Right.
And I'm sure, I'm not saying anything new to research, investigators out there, but
Mhm.
instead of talking to the rangers who seem to either not have a friggin' clue or aren't going to tell you anyhow unless you get them off by themselves with no
Right.
fear of repercussion. Oh, hiccup,
Right.
sorry. Like that's where we should be focusing our efforts and talking to them. And I'm sure they do talk to the people about Bigfoot sightings. And so we've had it happen in the past. We've had people
Mhm.
from park systems talk to us.
Mhm.
In Pennsylvania, it happens. They don't want to go on record. I did an investigation up in the northern part of the state for a guy that worked for a state agency. Didn't
Right.
want us using his name or anything because he was afraid he'd lose his job. These
Right.
people will talk. It's just getting the right person and making sure they're credible,
Mhm.
vetting them, and
Mhm.
they take an awful lot of risk talking about this. But here we are, almost 20 minutes into the show, and we haven't talked about a single damn missing person yet. I mean, it's
Right?
true because we talk about this in the abstract, but the abstract's
No.
important because it sets the groundwork
It
for
does set the
what we're
groundwork
doing.
because there's a lot of those employees in which you've given the number for that have gone out at midnight because a motorhome's battery is dead and they go out to recharge the battery. I'm sure a lot of those people probably have had some pretty bizarre experiences
Well, but
when they're going out all into these remote
Hello,
areas
Brian.
for 12, 20, 30 miles to get up into a trail through the woods, probably have had an experience just to go jump a battery on a motorhome that is completely dead that they phoned in that they had a problem on. And I would love to focus on some of
Yeah.
those people more than the park ranger itself.
No, absolutely. And Brian, our executive producer, posts in today's world, how many visitors would not have a cell phone on them when visiting a national park?
Mm-hmm.
And we find out that they become very helpful tools when trying to locate somebody, for a missing person. But the problem is in most of these places, they don't work.
yeah,
You're
so
just going
you
to
lose
get your
them in the
last minute
sauce.
Mm-hmm.
ping,
Mm-hmm.
but at least that ping kind of narrows the area upon which you could be searching. In
Right.
some instances, I don't know what the cell phone service is like in Yosemite,
I w-
where you and I were at this morning, James. We're close to town, and you'd lose us.
Mhm.
We get nothing.
It
I'll
matter
tell you
where you
one thing.
stood.
I will tell you one thing, and I didn't mean to step on you, Bake. I will tell you one thing. It's a national park. They are not putting up cell phone towers in the national park because
No,
it's designated as a national park. So
well, and
even
they
to
also have
today,
their
your cell coverage is very
yeah.
minimal in that area.
Go ahead,
They
James.
also have their own base communication.
Mm-hmm.
That's why every park ranger has a radio. That's why every so many feet there's a radio. There's a CB tower. That's why whatever. Because they basically say, look, the communication is so that we can talk to each other. We don't care if you talk to someone else. They're
No, that's true. Yeah.
you
But if
know
you've got the CB towers there, why don't you just put the cellular infrastructure on it?
probably because there isn't money in it.
Well, you have to run cable to it too. Wireless is only wireless to a point.
Yeah, and you
Right.
have
And
to have
then
generators and so on
and you
to,
have to
to
have a
power
cellular
that. Right.
company that wanted to put the millions of dollars of infrastructure in there too.
Yeah. No, they're
But
still designated in documents as far as what national parks,
Yeah.
once it's designated a national park, what can be actually installed in that national park. Now, for safety measures, they may expand that, but I don't think
Yeah.
that they have within recent years.
I don't know if you should, because if I'm going to a national park, I want to get away from it all. But at the same time, if I fall and break my fat ass somewhere, I want someone to be able to find me and retrieve
Yeah,
me.
well, they're going to say, well,
Well-
you should rely on satellite phone. Well, who can
Well,
afford that?
And you can, but the satellite phone's a little expensive. It's come down in price, mind you, but it's still expensive.
I'm sure
It's
it
not
is.
cheap. But in David Paulides' books, and anybody that has a good outdoors experience, you should at this point be carrying a
Mhm.
GPS locator. I'm investing in one of those little things I can text on.
Mm-hmm.
The little, I don't know what their emergency. You can use them anywhere, and
Mhm.
send a message if you're in
The
help.
beacon, right? It's
Yeah,
a beacon.
beacon.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Yeah,
worth it.
because I see Brian brings that same thing up.
Yeah.
Paulides recommends bring your own personal GPS locator when visiting national parks, along with a firearm. But yes, definitely bring something
It's
in
funny
bright
because
colors.
he does recommend firearms too, and it's
Mhm.
he's law enforcement, and I'm not anti-gun. You guys all know this. I don't personally carry a firearm, so if you're looking to attack me in the woods, I do carry a big knife, and I know how to use it pretty proficiently. But it's just not my thing. I don't trust myself with a firearm because I'm kind of an accident-prone person. But I carry a
I'll
weapon with
protect
me.
you.
But you should, carry some sort of personal protection, mainly because there are people out there that will hurt you and kill you. And
Mhm.
I've had some experiences of my own out in the woods where we've actually been shot at uh, by people, and that was
And
quite
solid.
frightening in itself. And that was on state game lands we were shot at, by the way, by a bunch of drunken
Yeah.
locals in pickup trucks.
See,
But-
still, my point is, I think the most dangerous animal out in the wilderness is another human being.
You're absolutely correct, man. Absolutely correct. Or, you know, I guess another potentiality we have to talk about, and I was reading that more along the lines in the, I don't know why they talk about it in the Great Smoky Mountains, but they don't talk about it in some of the other national parks, is Bill Sheehan, the guy we had in the show, always bring more
right.
gun. But it's true. Always bring more gun than what you think you'll need. That's Brian's fault. We should have just brought him on with us tonight. He's got all the wisdom
right
for us.
I think so.
But, you know, feral people. I don't know why we only talk about that in the Smoky Mountains. We don't talk about it in the other areas. And look, we've all seen Wrong Turn and The Hills Have Eyes. Like, it's not just explicit to Appalachia. Right. I think you have to look at that as a potentiality for some of these things. There are people that live off the grid and live a certain lifestyle. Am I saying they're all ravenous, inbred mutant cannibals? No, I'm just saying that there are people. When we go back and talk about Dennis, you know, the first show we talked about, Dennis Martin, you know, he was seen being carried by a large hair-covered wild man over his shoulder and by the Keys, Mr. Harold Keys. And that was never, you know, really fully explored as well as it could have been. And it's something you have to think about.
No, but there's a few science sites that are out there that have, you know, recently posted the articles of a newly discovered feral human that has been discovered in remains. And when they reconstruct what the skull looks like, it's very Bigfoot looking. It's creepy as, and I would have thrown that in the news segment for tonight, but we'll stick within the subject. But it is a very Bigfoot looking type of feral human that had a lot of hair on the face and not so much the conical skull structure, but I think the possibility, since the evidence is there, is that this probably still exists.
Absolutely. Well, I hate to cut us off here, but we do have to jump to our break. Folks, we'll be right back. Right after this, we'll be listening to some Stranger Than Fiction news as soon as I can find the damn button. And
that's okay.
Here we go.
Well, what do you mean?
Found that button.
This is the Sasquatch Experience, Stranger Than Fiction news and stories, brought to you by Dr. Squatch Soaps and Shampoos. Some of the funniest names, but boy, will you smell good. And our patrons. Just visit patreon.com/Sasquatch Experience and be part of the experience for as little as $2 a month. Some unsettling news right off of page 1. John Garish, Ellen Chung, and their 1-year-old daughter Miju, as well as the family dog Oski, were all found dead on August 17th in the Devil's Gulch area in the South Fork of the Merced River in the Sierra National Forest. Mariposa County Sheriff and responding agencies treated the scene as a hazmat situation because of the uncertainty and the cause of the fatalities. In a statement provided to the media, the sheriff's office successfully ruled out a myriad of causes that were the subject of media and investigative speculation, such as lightning strikes, carbon monoxide or dioxide poisoning, exposure to cyanide, illegal drugs or alcohol consumption, and suicide. During the beginning of the investigation, they did not rule out toxic algae blooms. Testing conducted earlier this month confirmed that nearby Merced River had high levels of toxic algae. And while Arizona State University professor Taylor Weiss previously said in an interview, finding evidence of that poisoning would be very challenging, but it is yet to be ruled out. Now this is where the story gets unusual. A portion of the Merced River near where the family died was closed earlier last month because of the toxic algae, while the Savage Lundy Trail reopened Sunday after being closed to, quote, unknown hazards. They have also yet to rule out extreme heat. The temperature at the time, according to the sheriff's office, ranged anywhere from 103 degrees to 109 degrees Fahrenheit. Previous autopsy data provided by the Mariposa County Sheriff's Office has ruled out chemical hazards on the Savage Lundy Trail and acute trauma such as stabbing or a gunshot wound or blunt force trauma. Mariposa County Sheriff's Office spokesperson Christy Mitchell told in an interview earlier this month that the results from several toxicology reports are still pending as of last Wednesday. A few key reports have yet to be obtained, according to the statement. A spokesperson did not immediately respond for a request for the interview last Wednesday. Detectives with the sheriff's office are continuing to investigate with a team of toxicologists, environmental specialists, and the FBI, among others. They said in a Wednesday statement their death is still being handled as a hazmat and coroner investigation. However, it also remains unclear what happened to the cell phone and social media records obtained by the FBI. Jeremy Brees said in a statement, "We respect and understand the need for information and details regarding this case. Our current priorities remain supporting and informing the Garish Chung family during this tragic time. As we navigate through this investigation with the family, we will later share our findings with the public." As an update to the investigation that was released late last week from the coroner's office, that the 3 family members and the dog died of dehydration and hypothermia, still leaving question as to where the cell phones are and where the social media records are that was obtained by detectives. Perhaps maybe frightened to death? Thanks again for listening to this edition of the Sasquatch Experience, Stranger Than Fiction, News and Stories. Let's continue some more mysterious conversation.
Yeah, how about that?
How about
Strange,
it, huh?
A strange freaking case. And in fact, at one point in time, somebody had brought up the potential that it was lightning, a specific type of lightning that killed them.
Right.
Which is so bizarre.
But that got ruled out because of the organ damage. And there's a couple of things in that news report that I wanted to bring up that is so suspect to things not making sense. First off, it was stated that from the sheriff's office, the temperature during the day ranged between 103 and 109 degrees, which is hot. So if you sustain through midnight, not only is the daytime temperature absorbed in the trees and the rocks and the entire surface around you will still radiate that heat, they claim those bodies died from hypothermia. I don't know that you lose that much heat during the night that you would have died from hypothermia. And secondly, the dog. The dog was found with the family that it also died of hypothermia. A dog will find water. A dog will just take off and go do what it needs to do. That's what a dog does. And yet it was found with a family.
But Vance, they were only 1.5 miles from their car.
Exactly.
You can make 1.5 miles.
Thing. You're sure you could. There's a lot of peculiar things. And why did the FBI detain their cell phones and not give up any records? Perhaps, and I'm not saying this is the case, but perhaps maybe they recorded something or had telecommunications with something or someone that stated what the situation was at the time. And yet the FBI detained all those records and are not releasing any of that information. And why was this family of 4 and when I say 4, it was 3 humans and a dog, were
Mhm.
found near the creek. And all of a sudden, the statement was, well, there was a toxic algae bloom. That was not known to these people when they first arrived into that area. It was stated everything is closed for an unknown hazard. What was the hazard? They didn't state that.
Well, and you go back to what Brian was saying, regardless if you had service or not, most people still carry a cell phone for pictures or video,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there could potentially be something on these cell phones. We recognize that. But then, going into this, we had a comment from Bill from our YouTube channel. I agree that talking to the Rangers, you might be getting an opinionated perspective. Talk to the witnesses. Also, when did toxic algae become a thing?
Right.
And that's very pertinent to this too, because one of the things they're talking about is, perhaps they ingested some of this. I just don't know. A mile and a half from your car,
Right.
like it just doesn't add up to me. There's something
Well, there was
strange
something else
about this.
that brought up, in my thought process of reading and investigating into the story. They seemed to be, and I can't confirm this. They seem to have been experienced campers in dealing with the wilderness. I do not know of anybody that does not have a water purification system with them. It's a tiny filter. You can purify all your water that you take and you can consume it, and it's relatively safe. If there was a toxic algae bloom and the state park said, hey, this area is closed due to toxic algae bloom, which they did not do, they would still purify your water. I purified my water when I was camping also, and that was, some years ago. And now that technology has gotten a lot better as far as purifying any kind of water that you would have taken in. So again, it leads me back to, why was the dog dead? The dog would have, look, dogs know as far as, being an animal, what's safe and what's not safe. There was a lot of strange things that happened, which is why I ended the news segment with, were they scared to death? That term came from something. We use that term. Oh, I was scared to death. That came from somewhere. I'm not trying to categorize it that it was a Sasquatch that did this, but to find a family of 4, and I keep going back to 4. It's 3 humans and a dog, all found dead in the same proximity, in close proximity to their vehicle, like you had brought up, Sean. There's something weird that's going on there, and they classify this as case closed. They died of hypothermia when the daytime temperatures was 103 to 109 degrees during the day. I'm sorry, but rocks and trees, they absorb that temperature. This is where the infrared systems used by rescue search that is used has a difficult time during the summer months, because a lot of that, the trees and the rocks are radiating a lot of the daytime heat. And, I just don't see that makes a whole lot of sense to say that these people perished because of hypothermia. I could understand dehydration. Maybe they didn't have a water filtration with them, but wow, there's just an untold amount of questions that I'm still scratching my head about. And this is only relative to last week when they're still coming with this. And this happened back on August 17th, and they still don't have an answer.
That's strange.
Yeah, it's very
We have
strange.
another comment from Bill Hum, and I have no way to put it in the
It's
chat. Hume. I understand the trail they took was higher altitude, then declined rapidly to much colder temperatures.
Mm-hmm. And that's true. Because of the fact that colder temperatures do settle in lower land levels, we all understand that. Even if it got down to, let's say, 40 degrees after 103 to 109 degrees during the day, you're still talking logically in physics that the temperatures, even in low-lying levels, would have been about 64 degrees. that's still not enough to create hypothermia. And they were all fully clothed, and everyone was found with their clothes on and near a creek. I don't know. This whole thing just doesn't seem to add up to me. And I think they're trying to sweep a lot of this under the rug. Again, we go back to the whole concept of, are the park rangers trying to kind of sweep and hide a little bit of this so that there's not this panic not to visit the national parks? I encourage everybody to visit national parks. They're a wonderful place to go. But when these oddities do happen, who's to say, what was the cause of it? We have so many reports in the past of people reporting strange bipedal creatures screaming and yelling and terrorizing and tearing up camps and so on. Again, I'm not going to lean on that whole thing to say, oh, this is definitely a Sasquatch. But the whole incident that happened less than a month ago is extremely strange as to what actually happened. Bake, what you have any take on any of this?
Well, the thing with it is like, so I own like 3 acres of land, and we've been really doing a lot of experimentation and different things like that. And the thing is with it is like, when I go out there with somebody else, because there's no cell phone service, there's no nothing. I want to make sure if something happens to me, there's somebody who can either walk to a house and say, hey, my buddy just fell down the creek and he's an idiot and his leg is going 3 different ways, or somebody that'll know what's going on. And I wonder, the fact is like a lot of these disappearances, a lot of these things, like, you wonder, what was going through their mind when they prepped for this trip. Now, we're not talking people that like their car broke down and they were stuck in the winter or whatever. These are people that got out of their house, bought a tent, bought some sleeping bags, bought all these things, have used them more than once, brought them all with you, and then somehow magically die of hypothermia or disappear completely.
Right.
There has to be a reason why their brain just turned off at one point, or something that no one could conceive of just happening.
Right. No, that's a good point, because we're only speaking about one case here. We're not talking about the hundreds of cases where people have completely vanished off the face of the earth with absolutely no trace. And if there is a trace found from very few cases, they're very peculiar. We have found cases where the victim's clothes have been removed, but yet folded. Shoes have been placed in a very peculiar setting as far as being set next to each other. We found a lot of resources that would create survival in these type of situations are all intact. So then why did these people just all of a sudden just disappear off the face of the earth? And a lot of family members of those victims that have disappeared stated quite clearly this was not a case of suicide. This wasn't something that, they were dealing with traumatically for life. And there are a lot of cases that have been eliminated for those that have taken their own life. Those are excluded from these reports. The reports that come in that fit the dynamics of those that have disappeared have family members to back them up to go, no, this is a seasoned person that has visited, these wildlife, and all of a sudden they disappear, but yet their clothes are found folded, or they're found in a very shallow creek face down, but yet they're designated that they died of drowning. So much of this just doesn't make sense to me at all. Welcome back, Sean.
Thanks. And then you go back to these anomaly cases where these people are out hiking with other groups. And they either get ahead of the troop and they disappear, or they fall a little behind and disappear. But the majority of the time they're ahead and they vanish.
Right.
So, what's to say about that? So I went and did some, because, I'm sure our Sasquatch listeners are like, well, where the hell does Bigfoot come into play? I went and did some work digging around databases for about how many Bigfoot reports there were in Yosemite. And I went by county, and there's only just a couple that actually mention Yosemite by name,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you go to Tulameen County, which has 36 reports, which is 10 Class A reports, 26 Class B, and then there's 2 newspaper articles. It makes it 38, but I don't count the newspaper clippings. Class
Mm-hmm.
B are things that aren't a visual encounter, just so we're aware. Uh, Mariposa County, there's 3 Vance.
Mm-hmm.
We were just talking about that with that last case
In
that
the news
somebody's
segment,
volume.
right?
I'm going to hit mute on everybody that's not me and Vance at the moment because I keep getting reverb. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We got to get this straightened out week after week. It's ridiculous. Mono County, 16 reports. And let me look it up here. I have another window open with the different sightings. Like, you have to look at these and realize that in Madera County, there's only 1 report that's near Bass Lake. So you think about this. That's not a hell of a lot of Bigfoot reports for the amount of people that are going missing, right?
Right.
And this is where I get torn, because we could easily say, well, these are Bigfoot behaviors, just taking people. But when you read these missing people encounters and these, the stories associated with these missing people, there's just not a lot of meat and potatoes that comes from the actual reports, right? So we could get into some of these. Stacy Eris, date missing July 7th, 1981, 14 years old, white female, 5'5", 120 pounds. Last seen wearing a white blouse with a square neckline, lace trim, shorts, vertical half-inch maroon and white stripes, yada, yada. It doesn't matter because it's, I'm sure that clothing doesn't exist anymore in 2021, right? After settling into her cabin, taking a shower, she began a 1.5 mile hike along the trail to Sunrise Lakes, where she intended to hike with a 77-year-old man who was part of the group that rode to Sunrise that day. Before getting far along the trail, the man became tired and sat down. The guide who led the ride to Sunrise was working at the corral and noticed she was standing on a rock about 50 yards south of the trail, and he was the last one to see her. So she was standing on a rock and then went missing.
Right.
Well, it's not very descriptive as to what happened in that brief little blurb, right? We could infer many different things on this. And then you go to the next one, who's a Jane Doe. They found her remains, but they believe that to be, Henry Lee Lucas is taking credit for that. But, for what that's worth, I mean, besides him being a worthless piece of crap, there's nothing else to that story that, is really telling you of anything else. But then here we go to Tim Barnes, July 5th, 1988, 25 years old, white male, 6'3", 180 pounds. Last seen wearing a white t-shirt with a red circle and an F slash through it. Walking north from the Murphy Creek trailhead at Tenya Lake at 9 a.m. Was starting a day hike to the Polydomes, and he's been missing since. Nothing found him. So he was just off on his own hiking.
Right.
And there are a couple of these. These are actually on the cold case site from the National Park Service.
Right.
At the beginning of the clip where I tell you there's only 29 of these cases, these are just the ones from Yosemite. There's a bunch on that list from, you go to nps.gov and click on the cold case. There's a bunch throughout the country, but these are the ones that are, of all these missing people that happen in national parks, there's like 29 cold case sightings.
Right.
What the hell?
Yeah.
And, even in reading these, there's not a whole lot of commonality between them.
Well, again, we go through to state national park. I'm not sure that a bipedal creature understands what the boundaries of a national park
absolutely.
are.
I concur with that.
Because we go from, the Sierra National Forest, which abuts to Yosemite National Park.
And then the Stanislaus, right? Also borders another forest.
And I'm not going to transfer this topic into a whole different scenario, but People say, oh, well, there's been osprey seen in this area. Well, that's because osprey don't understand what state boundaries are. They
And I
don't.
think,
Creatures don't understand. Oh, you're crossing into it
yeah,
because that's not part of what nature is.
and I think
And
you make the point there. Like, boundaries are only boundaries because we make them.
drew them
The
right,
animals don't understand that, and I don't think
right.
a Sasquatch would understand that either. So,
Hmm.
we're talking about an area where these creatures can travel. Well, we know through footprint analysis, and Henry, you can correct me on this, that we've had footprints happen in like Oregon and Washington, and
Right.
then they're seen where? As far as Texas, Henry? Is that right?
Hmm.
Or somewhere else? So, like,
Hmm.
that Henry shaking his head for the people on
Hmm.
that's correct, right, Henry? Like, we've had
That is
footprints from
correct. Yep.
individuals
Hmm.
Hmm.
that have been seen in other states. So these boundaries only exist to us. They don't exist to these beings, these other animals.
Right.
So to say it's not, I don't know, guys. I guess I'm just torn because I have an awful lot of empathy for the families and the victims in these situations and these people that have gone missing. And I don't want to minimize it and make it light when I'm talking about maybe there is a cause for this. I don't want to be an alarmist. I don't want to be one of those, crackpot, unscientific people. Well, Bigfoot did it because we don't know. But what we can also say is, an absence of evidence isn't an evidence of absence. It could be a situation where we have to contemplate that.
Right.
A large predator, something greater than us, could be responsible for some of these people missing. And behaviorally, you talk about opportunity. You have these solo
Hmm.
hikers. You have these people that leave groups.
Hmm.
Um, we go back last week to the stories of abductions that we've talked about that are notated in Bigfoot history for people that follow it. And then just reports we get on the regular from people about strange encounters, feeling weird,
Right.
being
Right.
disoriented, lost in the woods. Well, once again, we go to something like infrasound, right? Something
Hmm.
that we talk about very often in the Bigfoot field that we don't really have any, proof that it is exists or it's used, but
No.
feeling disoriented in the woods for no reason, something's causing that. And is it an infrasound attack that could be disorienting some of these people? Well,
Right.
yeah, I guess that's possible.
And there's a huge amount of researchers, and when I say huge, I'm talking probably 12. But there's a good substantial amount of researchers that have been in the
Allergies.
area in which we are talking about. Yosemite, the Sierra uh, Nevada National
Mhm.
Forest,
Yeah.
uh, and with the samurai sounds in which Ron Moorhead had recorded in the Sierra. But there's so much evidence of footprints that are taking off of quote unquote the unbeaten path. We're talking footprints that have been seen off trail, that have been photographed, documented, have been plaster of Paris saying, hey, there's this trail of footprints through here. There seems to be enough evidence where in a court of law would say, okay, this is definitely a bipedal creature that seems to be in this area, and we need to investigate or prosecute. But in this case, so much evidence has been found in these areas, especially in Yosemite. Uh, what do you do with it? Do you draw the correlation between all these people that are missing mysteriously without a trace to a Bigfoot because their bodies are not found in rivers?
Yeah.
And when bodies are found, they're found in a very peculiar way to say, the coroner's office says, well, the person died of drowning or hypothermia, even though they were only in 4 inches of water and their head was out of the water.
Well, here's another one there, Vance, for us. Peter Jackson,
Mhm.
missing September 17th, 2016. 74 years old at the time he went missing. White male, 5'10", 155 pounds. Excellent physical condition. Carrying a royal blue outdoor products day pack.
Mhm.
He is believed to have gone for a day hike from his campsite, but did not return. Sent a text message to his son saying that he was on his way to the park. His vehicle was found at the campground. Camping fees were paid through October 2nd. and the search for Jackson was placed in continuous limited mode. August 2019, his backpack was found on the west side of the Yosemite National Park. So all they found was his backpack so far.
Mm-hmm.
Disappeared in 2016. They find the backpack in 2019.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that's a pretty. It's kind of morbid. You think about that. The only thing you find is the backpack, right?
Yeah, it's disturbing. Sure it
Right,
is.
where's the rest of everything else? Where do they go? Now, you know, I was also reading, it was not applicable to this park, but one of the others, a guy that went missing, and they ended up finding him a month later. He went missing, didn't tell his family. He kind of went, I feel like he went on the lam
Mm-hmm.
for a little bit. He might have had some reasons to do so, business reasons or whatnot. But this guy has no reason to do that. Texas family pays his camping fees up to October 2nd and then disappears, leaves his car, and then they find his backpack later on down the line. And what's frightening to me is in some of these instances, when they go to find these people, some of their possessions are found in areas they've already searched.
Right.
That happens when we go to talk about the Rocky Mountain National Park or national parks.
Mm-hmm.
Bobby, what's his name? Right off the top of my head, I'm sorry. I just reading it earlier today. Bobby Bizup. They found his remains at a place they had already searched that was searched by the military.
Yeah. But
So
how
it's
many
just
times
strange.
does that happen?
A lot
How
in these
many
cases.
times in the national parks when somebody goes missing and they have the search and rescue, and we're talking up to, not limited to, but up to 1,400 people that are almost elbow to elbow searching the areas for thousands of acres.
Yeah.
And they keep sweeping in grids because, you know, search and rescue has a very very calculated way of which they do these searches. They do them in grids. They'll cover an entire grid and then work back, and then they start the next grid and work across that. Then they start the next one. They're working elbow to elbow, and then they'll come back and cover that ground again. And then you'll get a hiker that comes through the area that's been searched after they called the search off and said, oh, there's a body here, right in the area in which they have searched, and they find the body. There was no way that body would have been there during the search. So where did it come from back being placed there? Again, you could say, yeah, okay, it's, you know, some human psycho that's doing it, but who's living out there in Yosemite in an undiscovered searched area in a camp?
But who would put a body back in a place that was searched?
Exactly.
Why?
That's the mysterious thing of all of this. And again, you know, you touched on this subject briefly. I know that you shared, you know, some of this information as far as cave systems go.
Yeah.
You know, the situation in which I did in the news report, there were abandoned mines in the area. Okay, consider that a cave system because it's a dugout underground area. You know, who's to say that there's not something that's using that as a shelter, as a bipedal creature in a mine, or at least abandoned mine? Oh, but there's, you know, toxic chemicals in there that it's emitting. What would be toxic in there other than radiation? I could understand, you know, radon gas coming out of an abandoned mine. But outside of that, you're not going to have carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, or cyanide coming out of an abandoned mine.
But to a point where it's going to toxicate somebody in open air, like the significance of that would have to be pretty strong, Vance, for, you know, something
you would think so.
Well,
and they would have shut down that entire park if that were the case.
Yeah, absolutely.
So things just don't add up to me logically. They just don't seem to add up to me. It seems though that the more and more that we look into it, we do find natural caves and mines of those that have gone missing in the particular area in which they are in. I'm not saying, and I don't think you are or any of us are saying, hey, oh, it's a bipedal creature using a mine or a cave system for shelter. But it's kind of odd how they all exist in the area with the clusters. Again, I'm using that term that, you know, David Pilates coined, cluster areas. Yeah,
This
where there
clotting of
happens to
sightings,
be,
like,
where there happens to be caves and mines, mostly caves, systems that exist where these clusters seem to happen.
oh, and that's a topic worthy of exploration, which we'll do again later on
Mhm.
in this season. We got 6 more episodes past this one to go, and I
Woohoo.
think it's a topic very worthy of discussion because, as we start looking at these maps and we start gathering information, I did find that pretty cool infographic that was made by a Reddit user that is the overlay, and of course it doesn't take a genius to make it, but somebody took the time to put that out there, and so
Mhm.
I'm appreciative of it because it is a good visual, and I'll get that and see if I can get permission to use that and put it up as a graphic show because I don't like to take people's work without asking them. That's
Mhm.
just rude. um, but it's just, I don't know, I think we've explored this topic okay tonight. I would like to say fairly well, but there's so much to talk about. I don't feel like we do it justice in an hour. We can either
No.
continue on with Yosemite next week or we can move on down the trail a little bit. I really don't know. The stories are, kind of the same but different. I don't want to trivialize anybody in saying they're just another story because they're not. They're a person and
Mhm.
they matter to somebody and they're, somebody's child, somebody's loved one. And for listeners, please don't ever take it that I'm, just trying to, trivialize anything because they're all important to us in some way, shape, or form. But the problem is there's a lot of similarity in their cases.
Mhm.
So much David Paulides written 10 books, and there's been 100 different podcasts, thousands of different interviews about it. And still, we're no closer to answering this mystery than we were when we started this.
Not
And
until we're a
David,
victim of it.
and you know what, though? That's the bitch of it because we all
Right.
spend a lot of time out there.
Right.
Bake can be going out one day doing one of his regular Monday routines, and that's the last we ever see him.
Mhm.
I could go out and do one of these investigations in the Pennsylvania forest, and nobody ever sees me again.
Right.
Now, that's
No.
unlikely because I don't go alone.
I don't know if
I
they could carry you over their shoulder though, Sean. Could
They
they?
need to have one big shoulder. Let me tell you,
Wow.
they need to have one
Uh,
big shoulder to carry my ample sized posterior out of the woods.
love
I
you,
mean, want to bring
brother.
a wagon. I ain't
A
going without a
squat
fight. And that's an
wagon. Yeah,
awful lot
right.
of dead weight to carry if they kill me. So good luck.
Oh, that's great.
But
Wow.
it's just the reality of where we're at. You spend enough time in the woods, it could happen to anybody. It could happen to somebody
Mhm.
we love.
Mhm.
I often think about that. I was just going to talk to my father-in-law over the weekend. Doing this missing 411 makes me a little paranoid. And
Mhm.
Dad likes to bike ride and likes to hike and do things. And like it scares me a decent amount because, like, hey, he could end up being a missing 411 story
Right.
if he's not careful. And I
Right.
don't want to put that fear in anybody because I want everybody to love the great outdoors and to experience it and embrace
Mhm.
it and enjoy it for its natural wonder that it is. But
Yes.
damn, folks, there's a dark side to this,
Yeah,
and
it
we
seems
have
to
to
be,
talk and understand
right?
it.
Like I said, and I'll kind of wrap up on my end here. I've been to Yosemite twice. It's
Mhm.
beautiful. I would never discourage anybody from going to experience the awe-inspiring views and beauty of nature. But there are hundreds of cases of very mysterious disappearances of people. Not those, we're all excluding those that have been solved through suicide or virtual, they wanted to disappear. We're talking mysterious
Yeah.
disappearances of people that report back to their family or close to the family and that have just suddenly disappeared without a trace and absolutely no trace in the investigation and the search and rescue squads that have gone out there in hundreds. And again, we go back to, the common thread of how weather changes immediately after these people go missing. Is this opportunistic? But being at Yosemite, I would never discourage anybody from going there because, hey, if your end is going to come to you being picked up by the ankles by a Sasquatch and slammed into a tree, and that's how it ends, well, you know what? You went out at least seeing some pretty cool bit of nature on this planet anyway.
Henry, any final thoughts for the show?
Well, it's interesting. The the story that Vance was talking about during the news segment, how these individuals supposedly may have ingested some sort of chemical, and they wound up dead, and the dog too. Hey, there's something weird going on there. Something strange. Some of these cases are stranger than fiction. That's for sure.
That's why he does the news on them, buddy. It's all in the title. Bake,
Yes, it is.
final thoughts from you, sir.
I was just kind of how Vance was like, if you're going to die in the woods, wouldn't it be amazing that you got killed by something?
Well, what better way to go?
Yeah, right?
I was totally right, and it's clawing out my chest. Right. Yes.
Saved
I'm
himself
glad
for
you're
another
on board
week,
with me.
folks.
Yeah, right.
James Baker right there. Before we
Suck
finish off the show, we got to thank our Patreons, our Hollers Club supporters, Gail Fredericks, Kevin Casey, Laurie Worthington, our track caster, Jeffrey Lee Mathis. I'm going to get his name right this week because I royally screwed it up last week. And, of course, our executive producers, Brian Corbin, Tom Mihok, and Aaron Homyuk. We couldn't do the show without you folks. Thank you so much for supporting us. Of course, being a Patreon, you get the show for as little as $2 a month, free, no ads, or ad free. It's not free. You pay $2, you get the show ad free. And of course, folks, you can find us anywhere on social media, Sasquatch Experience on Facebook and Instagram, and Squatch EXP on Twitter. And from there, you can find us instead of us telling us where you can find us each and every week. Just go to our social media and do your own homework. Henry, why don't you go ahead? One more thing. For any information that could help locate any missing child, please contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-843-5678. That number's manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you can also call, or you can also go to missingkids.org. Folks, also the National Park Service hotline, the tip line you can call is 1-888-653-0009. Once again, that's 1-888-653-0009. That's the tip line for the National Park Service for these cold cases. If you have any information that could help locate one of the missing people on this list, go to nationalparkservice.nps.gov, cold cases. They are looking to take your information. It's really important, folks. We help each other out. This is the human journey. We all share this planet together, and we all have a responsibility to each other. And if we can help give information we have that can save a life, let's do it. Please, I implore you to find out these resources. Go out and help as much as you can in any of these missing people scenarios. Thank you for listening, folks. Henry, why don't you give them?
What's your final?
Hey, that's my line. Henry, give us those final words.
Y'all be good or be good at it.
Damn people taking my job. All right, folks, we'll see you next week.
Good job.
Thank you.